translation into English first.
On the occasion of the month of the Dhul Hijjah, he's asking what is the importance of Hajj for Muslims and in general and for Ahmadi Muslims in particular.
I think the question is wrongly framed. It should be, what's the importance of Hajj for the whole mankind? Because that is the most important thing which should be kept in view when you talk of Hajj. Because the very house which we circuit during the Hajj has been introduced in the Holy Quran. Number one, the most ancient house. And number two, awwala baytin, not only ancient but the very first. wudi'a linnase, linnase. awwala nasin wudi'a linnase awwala baytin wudi'a linnase lallati. awwala baytin wudi'a linnase lallati bi Bakkata mubarakam wa hudam Khudam wa Rahma. You know, I don't want to recite any word wrongly until I'm sure. That is why I'm waiting for the real verse to. Awwala baytin wudi'a linnasi lallati bi Bakkata mubarakam wa hudam wa rahmatul fi inna awwala baytin wudi'a linnasi lallati bi Bakkata mubarakam. रहमत नहीं है, वह हुदन लिल आलमीन. First of all, wudi'a linnase, for the whole mankind, not for Islam, not for any other religion, but for the whole mankind. Lalazi bi Bakkata. The word Bakka is the name, the oldest name of Makkah. So it was built when Makkah was called Bakka and not Makkah. This shows the ancient, age when this house was built there. There was no Makkah as such. It was Bakka. Mubarakam wa Hudan lil Alameen. It was Mubarak, blessed, and Hudan, source of guidance for the entire whole of the world. Alameen is in fact universe, but the word Al-Alameen is used in the Quranic text as the known world of the time. So this is the nature of this house round which we circuit. And it should be remembered that no Islam is mentioned, no religion is mentioned. Only what is mentioned is that the first house ever built for the sake of mankind. And it is not even mentioned that for the sake of God. See? So this is a very strange verse, very interesting, very profound verse, which should be well understood before we come to the issue of Hajj. It is this house around which we circuit. It is this house which attracts the people from far and wide, all over the world in fact. It is this house which is a tribute to the unity of mankind, and also a tribute to the unity of God. Because in other verses, it's being Baitullah is also mentioned. So this is the beginning of unity of mankind and unity of God, and to bring them together at one. This means that the first ever religion that descended from God was here in this house. And this seems to have happened before Adam, because this Adam whom we follow, or who is the head of the religious movement, or the first of the religious movement, which was to lead to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whole line of the religious order, is headed by Adam. But no Adam is mentioned in relation to Khana Kaaba and Hajj. So it is not just an omission, it is a very clear-cut message that this house is certainly more ancient than that. And that shows also that this house was the beginning of civilization. This house brought man from the age of living in the caves to the age of living on the surface. And upon the surface, this house gave them the first lesson as to how they should live. And that is why Hazrat Ibrahim ﷺ is not mentioned as founder of this house at all. He found the ruins of this house and rebuilt the house from those ruins. So there are so many things which are particularly of interest in relation to Khana Kaaba. When you understand, then you will understand the significance and why it is only Islam which is chosen for the symbolic representation of this house. See? This house, in fact, completes the full circle of the verse, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. Things which began from Khana Kaaba will return ultimately to Khana Kaaba, and such the full circle will be completed. Mankind will be brought once again under one banner of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And An-Nas as such would once again become An-Nas as one entity. This is the significance of Hajj, in fact. Hajj reminds us, this is the first significance. The Hajj reminds us that we, with the blessing of this house, which was built specifically for the sake of mankind, you once began your journey into faith or religion as one people. There was no division, no schisms, no sects, only one religion. And that was the religion of unity of God. God was one, and you and Nas were one on the surface of earth, and this was the house as a symbol of unity. Then things began to split and spread out, and so many divisions took place in the religious and other human interests, which began with unity and got split and all scattered. In the ultimate design of God, the same house was to bring mankind once again together. This is the first significance. First, let him translate this, and then I'll turn to the second. It's a very good question, very appropriate. Hajj is not very far from here, and it's a very good message we can deliver to the whole world about the significance of Hajj and other things of interest. Now this house has also some distinctions which some are referred to in the Quran, some are referred to in Hadith, and also when we consider the way the Hajj is carried out, we can notice some distinctions ourselves as well. To pilgrimage a certain place or site with religious significance is not which has happened for the first time. All over the world, people have been pilgrimaging to their holy sites. In India, there is Banaras, there is पूरा नाम क्या सर? हरिद्वार किस रामा का नाम पे है या किसके? ये ब्रह्मा के नाम पर नहीं. I've forgotten the name of Hardwar is dedicated to one name of God in Hinduism. where they visit every year. And Banaras is visited, and some other places in India and in Europe there have been many places where people visit and do sort of their Hajj. And Turin is also a site of people's visit and so on and so forth. So it is not for the first time that it has happened that people visit a certain place. But there is nowhere in the entire world where people from entire world come and visit at least once a year. This is unique. India has Hardwar, but only the Indians and Hindus from India, they visit it. And seldom will it happen that people visiting India on their own would also go to Hardwar. But a place which attracts Chinese, Japanese, Americans, British, all other Europeans, Africans, South Americans, name a country, and you will find that some people from that country do visit, if not every year, during some years, this house of God. So this has already been proved that Awwala Baitin Buza bin Nase has become again that house which has been accepted by the representation of all mankind to be the house which they respect and which they visit. And this was done through Islam. This was done through Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This delivers the message to the Muslims that the purpose of Hajj is to remind you, among other purposes, that you are made responsible for bringing the entire mankind under one banner. And until you achieve that purpose of your creation, you have not fulfilled your responsibility. So it is a message of tabligh. It's a message of iblagh to the whole mankind, and to bring them to the ultimate unity upon earth, which will then achieve the very purpose of the creation of mankind. So that is one message. Let him translate it, and then I'll turn bit by bit to other messages which are contained in the Hajj. Now, as I mentioned before, Adam is not the first of the prophets of Allah, or first man, whatever they consider him to be, who built this house, because it is not mentioned at all in relation to Adam. And the name of the first prophet is not mentioned. The first man who, with the blessing of Allah, prepared it, is not mentioned at all. This means that it is a thing of such ancient times, that the history of those religions and prophets have not been preserved. So it's irrelevant and meaningless to mention any name. But this house was built here for the first time. So when we study the history of civilization, then we understand that this origin of this house must be very, very remote, because man had learned to live in man-built houses much, much earlier than the time of Adam. This is established. So sometimes back in the human history this was created, and it was irrelevant who created it. What was relevant was that it was done specifically by God with a purpose. And that purpose sometimes acquires the first position, although chronologically the purpose is served at the very end. So if the first man had been mentioned, the importance would have been given to him. Well, the importance is not to be given to him. The importance is to be given to him who will fulfill the purpose. And that is Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is why the chronological history is mentioned only from the time of Abraham, who is Abul Anbiya, and in whose progeny Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was to appear. So this is the second important message, that don't bother your heads, your investigation about who that first man. It's not of any significance and importance. For whom it was built, that is of significance. And that is for that prophet who had to be the universal. The only universal prophet who could bring mankind together to this house. And that is Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So special durood and salam should be sent to him during this period of Hajj. And all services should be offered to him to achieve that ultimate noble goal of unification of man under one God. Qabla that Adam, who is the head of the religion tree on which the final fruit of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah was born. So human evolution has taken many courses. Religion has gone through many experiences. Religion in Australia can be traced back to 40,000 years. But it is not mentioned because the tree was to come to an end without bearing the ultimate purpose of creation. That is Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So only in that respect Adam is first. Before him there may be many experiments in religions and many other minor prophets could have been born, which came and went and the whole thing was packed and dispatched. So that is which must be understood. This is further supported by that Kashf of Hazrat Ibn Arabi, which speaks of many Adams, not one Adam, who came before this Adam, whose progeny we are. So people should not live with a very limited view of the world and the beginning of mankind, etc. This is a much vaster subject. So Ibn Arabi at that age, when the science had not yet discovered the origin of man to be much, much earlier than the 6,000 years ago, as Adam is known to have been born about 6,000 years ago, he must have seen this vision from God. No man can imagine from himself such a thing. And yet he was shown in vision with reference to a hadith of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these things are very profound. But people live with their prejudices, with what their forefathers have taught them, and they don't want to shed these prejudices and grow out of that. But with the grace of Allah, through Ahmadiyyat, we have been enlightened by Allah. And we know that the religious scenario is not limited entirely to the beginning of Adam. It's much earlier. And the Quran supports us in this way. It speaks of most ancient time, and the Hadith supports us. So explain this, and then I'll turn to the third important. Now we turn to the manasik-e-Hajj. Each manasik of Hajj has its significant message, and the style in which Hajj is carried out. And there are so many profound messages which relate to the purpose of Islam and ultimate unification of mankind, which should be very clearly remembered, borne in mind, and realized in real life. For instance, with the Hajj is related the shaving of a head. With Hajj is related the wearing of a cloth which is not sewn. And just without shoes, without things, to roam madly, apparently without any purpose, to go circuiting, to go up and down the two hills, and to run and sit in the open and remember God with the top of your voices. All this is significant and laden with messages, in fact. So when we understand the messages, then the purpose of Hajj would be understood properly. Now this wrapping in one open sheet which is not sewn, and this shaving of head should remind every Muslim that this is what happens when we come to the world. When a child is born, this is exactly what happens. We shave his head within the prescribed days, and we wrap him in one open sheet. Never you have shirts made and trousers made for a newborn baby. So that indicates that Hajj is designed to create a new creation out of you, as if you are born for the first time. All your previous life of crime and sin and things should be cleansed, should be left behind in the past. And you remember that you are like a newborn baby in religion. So that is why it is essential for every Muslim. Remember this. Whoever can afford, he must go to this house. Because the spiritual rebirth is for everybody. And that also reminds us that by shaving our head, we fulfill a responsibility which is related to the shaving of a head. What is that responsibility which is related to the shaving of a head? In every religion, those monks and religious leaders shave their heads who dedicate their lives to God, not others. Nuns shave their heads because they have offered all their life to religion. So as a symbol of that, they shave their head. Monks in Buddhism shave their head as a symbol of their total dedication to their faith. And Hindu Pandits shave their heads to indicate their dedication to their faith. So shaving of head is not only here but also elsewhere in African religions and non-African and non-European religions. This is a very deep, it has a very deep significance with dedication of life. And that is why Hazrat Abraham ﷺ was told to offer a sacrifice instead of slaughtering his son, because it was a dedication which Allah wanted. So his dedication was accepted. So in memory of a dedicated child who is given over to Allah, the heads are shaved, which indicates that there will not only be one Ismail out of the Ummah of Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Millions upon millions, and a day would come when billions of people will be dedicated to Allah and they will live for God, and this will be the ultimate purpose of their life. This is what we should learn from Hajj. Not just saying some takbir loudly and imagining that we have been cleansed and we have been washed. This dedication must continue, and we must never return to the earlier states. So one should consider oneself as having been given over to God after Hajj. And those who have not been able to do Hajj, they should at least remember the lesson from Hajj. They should live like people who have done their Hajj. So if God gives them opportunity, well and good, because that is the real, that is really essential for every Muslim if he can afford. Those who can't afford, they can at least live a life like one who has performed Hajj. And even that could be accepted by Allah if he can't afford to go there personally. Apart from this, there are other messages like Rami. We stone 3 Satans, or shall we say the images or symbols of 3 Satans. What are these 3 Satans? The Holy Quran does not mention 3 Satans as such in the Holy Quran. It is one Satan and his Zurriya. So why 3 Satans? who are they? And if we dedicate our lives to God and we bury our past, what are those Satans in relation to this act of our dedication to God? And if we are reborn, then what is the significance of Rami of these three Satans? Small and the medium and the big Satan. Without understanding, the purpose of this Rami will not be achieved. One should remember that with relation to one's birth, the Holy Quran tells us that He raised us in the wombs of our mothers. في ثلاث ظلمات في ظلمات ثلاث, in three zulumat. What are zulumat? They are related to Satan. So we came to light while we were brought up in zulumat. So we must leave the zulumat behind, never to return to those zulumat and emerge into light permanently. So there are many explanations can be offered of this verse, but here I remind you that in human birth, the journey to the light passes through three kinds of darknesses, which are physical in the physical birth and spiritual in spiritual birth. So when we are spiritually reborn, we must stone those darknesses which are symbols of Satan, which grow from within us. And they have been mentioned in the Holy Quran in different ways. On this I spoke in my Jummah sermons for so many times continuously, and still I could not exhaust the subject, so I left it, because there are other things also to be said. So remember this, that is nafs-e ammara, which we stone, the Satan from within us. And it has three different varieties of misleading us, rising from within us. During the last sermon and the sermon before, I spoke in detail as to the meaning of these zulumat, but here in this short discourse, let it suffice that destruction of the evil voices we hear from within us. That is the symbol of this Rami. If we go on stoning a small hillock of stones and come back, what shall we achieve? Meaningless. The whole Hajj is symbolic, and without understanding the symbols of Hajj, we cannot benefit from it. So there we stone apparently an outward thing, but remembering that it is a symbol of stoning the sources of zulumat within us. And this should remind us, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شُرُورِ أَنفُسِنَا وَمِنْ سَيِّئَاتِ أَعْمَالِنَا. It is these shururi anfusina in plural and sayyi'at a'malina from which we seek shelter with Allah. And it is these shurur and sayyi'at which we stone. And I assure you that they can be categorized in three. Three types of darknesses have also been mentioned in Surah Falaq, which are a phenomenon of creation, with which the dangers of three darknesses is born out of creation. So instead of elaborating further, let everyone imagine himself and concentrate on this issue, and he will find a good satisfactory answer for himself, that from within us we face the dangers of three darknesses growing from within. And we must seek Allah's shelter and stone them with nafs-e lawwama, which in fact stones the nafs ammara, rejects its call, and then reaches the nafs mutmainna. So the Hajj is for the purpose of reaching nafs mutmainna. This can only happen when the lawama stones the inner voices of evil. And having done it, then the purpose is completed and you gain that nafs mutmainna with which you live in full submission to God. These three darknesses are mentioned in the Holy Quran, in other places as well. في بحر اللجي يغشاجه موج من فوقه موج من فوقه سحاب. Zulumat are mentioned in this verse again in three tiers. In the darkness of deep sea, there is a darkness because the moj covers, a wave of water covers and blocks the passage of light. Min fawqihi mawjun. Another wave of water covers a second screen which blocks the passage of light. Min fawqiha sahab, and there is no sun shining above either. So three darknesses are mentioned internally as well as externally, from which we are taught to seek shelter of Allah. So this is a very significant thing. Rami is not just a meaningless rite like we find in some other religions or people. It is a very profound message which it delivers. Now Safa and Marwa. Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah hai. Puri verse?
من شعائر الله.
हाँ, पूरी वर्ष क्या है?
الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله فمن حج البيت وبيت عمره
فلا جناح عليه يطوف. فلا جناح أن يطوف هما بهما يطوف بهما
ومن تطوع خيرا
فإن الله شاكر عليم. Now what is the significance of Shair, these two Shair, As-Safa wal Marwata? The fact is that these are two small plateau-like protrusions on one side of the site of Kaaba and one on the other side of the site of Kaaba. When Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam left Hazrat Hajra in that barren site and went away, after a while the water was finished and the food was about to finish, and there was nothing which she could give to her thirsty child. Whatever his age was, Ismail's age, but he was a young child, and he was kicking the soil, the sand, in agony, in search of water. It couldn't come from anywhere. Then in that extreme anguish, Hazrat Hajra went up and down one small hillock and saw around, and then went to another small hillock and saw around in search of some caravan which may be passing that way. So this is a symbol which reminds one of search for truth, and this is what reminds one that unless Allah sends the means of spiritual sustenance, you can't survive. So that is why when once passing by the child, she suddenly noticed that water has sprang from under his feet. This was a symbol that sometimes humans are not made an agency by God. Sometimes it directly comes from Allah, but springs forth from underneath you. If you depend upon God, and if you search, if you look for help from him and him alone. So this Safa and Marwa sa'i reminds us of that precarious moment in the life of Hazrat Ismail and his mother, when water came only from God, not even delivered through the agency of humans. So this reminds us that the messages of God are all important. The spiritual water always comes from Allah. But it grows from underneath. That is to say, people are born with this message from this earth. And no prophet of Allah descends from heaven directly. But he grows like ordinary human beings here, and they become the source of delivering the water which comes from on high. So this is another very beautiful message delivered by the Hajj. But the time is over, and the Hajj is a much bigger, act of worship. We may return to it later on, but I think for the time being this should be sufficient. Right? Think it's sufficient for the time being?
Yeah.
Okay. Please.